Okay, here we go. So it is now 3:32, and you are, if you're here or if you're watching this wherever you are in at the Worldwide Virtual Storytelling Guild, which is a function of Northeast Storytellers. And my name's Steve Daut, and I'll be kind of hosting for a little bit, but then Cris will probably take over because I've got to go do something else. So I don't have the list of tellers,
And who I thought was going to be first isn't here.
oh, okay,
So, right now I have Pat would like to tell a story, and Gail Herman would like to tell a story, and Galen and Jackson would like to tell a story. Is there anybody else? We have room for 5 tellers.
I'd be glad to be last
okay,
because it's
Cris,
rough.
that works.
Steve,
Well, we're assuming that then, because I'm going to take them in the order that you gave me, except
Steve,
for Pat, and Harvey wants to know if we
no, no,
can all. No.
I didn't write anything. But I was going to say, do you want to, since some of these people are new, go through the process of time limits and how we do this before we start having
Yes,
people doing it?
I very well can do that. Thank you, Harvey. Um, so the way we do it, and we will assume that there's going to be 5. Uh, so so that would mean we've got to divide this time up by 5, and we have 90 minutes, and it is 90 today. And so generally we figure for if there's 90 tellers, or if there's 90 tellers, yeah, right. No, that's Sheila does that. Yeah. Uh, if there's 5 tellers, and if there's 90 minutes for us that with issues between and before and after, that we schedule about 75 minutes. So what that means is that each teller has 15 minutes. What we prefer is about a 10-minute story. Then we have a little discussion about it. If you have any questions that you want to hear comments on, that's great. We'll do that. If not, then we'll move on to the next. But we'll let people comment, and usually we'll fill up that 15 minutes. Now, if you have a story that takes 15, then you get no discussion. So the preference is to have 10 minutes, and that's what we really shoot for. Is please try and limit your stories to 10 minutes so you can get some feedback, because we hate to cut off the feedback. A lot of times it's useful for the tellers, and it certainly is useful for everybody to be able to make their comments and so forth. So that's
And
really
for
what it's
people who
about.
don't know, for people who don't know the virtual guild at all, we meet 3 times a month at different times to accommodate people from various different time zones. We meet the first Thursday of the month at 8:30 in the evening. All times are New York. We meet the second Saturday at 6 o'clock. We meet the third Sunday at noon. And I put out a call for tellers on our listserv. And if you're not on the list, put a note give me your name and your email in the chat, and I will send it to the marvelous Joe Radner, who, with American University, very graciously provides us with the listserv. And that's how the communication goes out.
Okay. So and Pat Cris, by the way, she is basically one of the founders of this and the guru, and she has the overview of the whole thing. I'm just a lowly
I
Sunday
forget about that.
host.
Hope Lewis
Yes.
and I
No, you
started.
pick one.
Hope Lewis and I started this in 2018,
Yeah.
before the pandemic, because she's in Southeast Maine,
All
a
right.
long way away from anybody. I'm in rural Western New York. a long way away from anybody.
Well,
And we said, there has to be a
isn't
way
she
for
just so excited?
distant tellers to meet with each other. And that's how this started. And I can't believe this was 2018.
Yeah.
This is going on 5 years.
Yeah,
Holy cow.
pretty amazing.
Incredible.
Pretty amazing. So thank you, Cris. Thank you. That's
Well, absolutely.
we wouldn't be here without her. Yeah, Harvey.
Let me just add one more thing about the group. This isn't a place where people do usually their finished product in production. It's a way to practice something you're working on.
Right.
And it's recorded, and then Jim Brule sends out the recording to everybody on the list. But if you're practicing something and you don't want everyone else to see it, you can text or email Jim Brule, and he'll pull that piece out of the one that's shared with everybody.
Well, and
We'll
you've probably
also pull
noticed
it
that
out
this
and
is
make it available to you if you want
Right.
your own private copy of it.
right. You've
So-
probably noticed that this is a highly formal gathering. So everything has to be absolutely perfect. Anyway, so
I
yeah,
still am
feel
not
free to
seeing
share and
who I thought would be here.
okay.
Gail, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'm game.
Yeah, Cris. Yeah,
I'm-
Cris. Okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
How long do we have? 5 minutes?
10
You
minutes.
have 10 minutes, and then we might have up to 5 for comments and so forth.
Well, I don't need 10 minutes, although time me because sometimes we forget. Okay, so my story, I didn't realize it was a real story until, the oars on Wednesday night. And we talked about family, and I told it there. So some of you might have been there. Anybody? Galen was there? Yeah, you were at. So this will be a run through again. But the topic is family and chosen family. And so in my small group, all of a sudden I started talking about how I got our family. And it was very simple. I didn't want to overpopulate the world. So I decided one child is fair. And then the second child will be adopted. And I had my daughter Lita, and she was adorable and wonderful and easy to pick up and carry to storytelling events, even on planes. And Steve and I were just so happy in that setting. I'm going to put myself in gallery. I like to see your expressions. And so you can imagine, teaching and traveling, it was easy with one child. In fact, when they were young, they got on the plane for free. Can you imagine? And so everything was fine. And then I began to collect people to live with us. It didn't happen because I asked for it. It just happened. The first one was my girlfriend's son, who needed a little more, she was divorced, and she sent him to us, my godson he is, because she felt it would be good to be with a man, as well as a woman. And he went to school in Maryland at the lake. We had a Oakland, a high school. He came when he was in high school. And that was our first edition, but he didn't come alone because he wouldn't come unless his friend that was old enough to drive could come. So I had Scott in one upstairs bedroom, Richard in the other. And we were a family of 4, and it was wonderful to have 2 boys. I never realized the fun that boys are. Lita was already out of the house. She was in college. And they stayed for 4 years until they were done. Scott was done. He wanted to go back home, and Richard was finished when he graduated. So the next time that we had someone was our nephew, Jeffrey. And Jeffrey was flunking out of school at a nearby school, actually, in Maryland, but not in the Lake Mountain region where we were. So my sister-in-law said, go live with Gail and Steve. Go to the community college where they teach. Well, that was a good idea because we were right there at the college. He was right in the upstairs bedroom. He was having to do the work that needed to be done. He knew it. He knew it. This was his second and only second chance. So he finished community college. And it was then that I realized, because of something one of the 3 of them said, you know, that bedroom is right above your bedroom. I said, yes. One of them said, you know, we can hear every sound, every movement, every word that you're saying. I said, oh my God, why didn't you tell me? Oh, we couldn't do that. Gail, no, Aunt Gail, no. So we were a little more careful when guests came to live to visit at the lake house, realizing what that meant. I guess they got a very good education. So the next thing that happened for family was creating an overseas program that brought in the Baltic states students that the National Guard asked Steve, because, you know, they were, Steve had to help when they asked. So this was a very different help. They asked that we bring in people from Estonia because the National Guard was helping Estonia to develop its, what would you call it, system? I hate to say Army or Navy or anything like that, but its system to be Estonia and not Russian. And this was years ago, many years ago, 23 years ago. So we took these students in, and it was my job to find them housing so that they could go to school free. They had no money, very little money. They had to have 1,000, I think it was, but that was outrageous. Most couldn't have that. So they stayed with me until one of the local AAUW or Civic Club or whatever organization I was in as the president's wife, because he was president of the college, and I got them to live free. Well, after staying 2 or 3 weeks at our house, we were pretty glad when they left, given what we found out about our upstairs bedroom above our bedroom. I'll tell you that right now. But one time, a couple of people came from Estonia, and I had gotten 2 of them. They were sisters from, actually, they were Russian, but lived in Estonia. And I got them a place to live. But the third was Riley. And because she was very allergic to a lot of animals, and we lived in a farming community where everyone had dogs, cats, chickens, sheep, cows, you name it, they had it. She was extremely allergic. Our house was the only house that had no more pets in it because they had all died off. And so she stayed, and she stayed, and she stayed. And as she stayed, we began to really feel like a family. And this was important to Riley because she didn't have a family. Her mom had passed away, and she had been raised by her grandma. So we were really like a family. And it was so wonderful that when we finally realized it, Lita, my birth daughter, just fell in love with Riley too. There was no jealousy or anything. And Riley took after Lita and became a Chinese medicine healer, just like Lita. So it was, and Lita was out of the house, and eventually Riley went out of the house, and now we're all in Massachusetts, Northampton, Huntington, East Hampton, and we are all a very happy family. And so I wanted to share that because I realized Pat, Coffie, and other people that were there at that event, that it really is a story. And I'm telling it so that I can hear it, so that you can hear it, and you can tell me what is the important part of the story and how I could improve it. Thank you.
Okay. So that was great. So
How long did it take? 10 minutes?
No, it wasn't. It was, well, it was, yeah.
Yeah,
It
I thought-
was right at 10 minutes.
okay.
Yeah, it was exactly 10 minutes.
Little too long for that, I think, but I had to get it all in. And the first time I told it, I didn't tell about Jeffrey or Scott or Richard living with us. They're like family. I'm called pseudo mom for Richard.
Okay, do we have comments or questions?
Cris?
One teeny thing. I love it that this is what you started off with, and then this little bit and that little bit. It was a marvelous story. Do tell us though that Steve is your husband.
Okay.
I mean, I know that because I know you.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of names of people, so we need to know that when you talk about Steve, that this is.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about me for a minute.
Are there places that were confusing, or is it too big?
Hi, Gail. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Hi, nice to see you.
Yeah, Anna.
It was so sweet. Such a sweet story. I was just a little bit confused when you introduced Riley because I thought she was lumped in with the students from Estonia.
Yeah, she is one of the students.
Oh, she
from
was.
Estonia. And
okay.
Everybody else, housing, but the one of the three that came that one, semester, she couldn't go. Everybody had pets. And so Riley was, thank you for, I haven't even written this out. This is all, but yes, Judith.
Well, and maybe this was sort of a neat, Anna's question was, Riley doesn't sound like an Estonian name to me.
Oh, Raili. It means railroad, or it has a root of being railroad. And she doesn't know why that she was named that.
And so maybe it would have helped to have, if you can say it or pronounce it, would be to say, and we our one Estonian who stayed on was Riley, da 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 da.
Yeah.
Give the other name, and it would be, I don't know. It just, that is such a teensy point.
Oh, but it's
And-
important. Yes.
And if you tell it to younger audiences, you might want to say, you know, there was a time when we really worried that the earth was going to explode from too many people. And some of us decided not to add to the weight. So, or whatever, because you really passed, you know, deciding to adopt because of overpopulation is a pretty weighty decision.
Yeah.
So I would give that another sentence or two.
Oh, good. Okay. Just like kind of elaborate on.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And then Lita was out of the house before you ever adopted a second child, but you got your extra family anyway. But I don't know, there might be a bridge there somewhere. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. I love hearing personal stories like that.
All right. I got to crack the whip here. We're at 15 for you, Gail. If anybody has additional comments for Gail or questions at all, please put them in the chat. And now
Thank
we're
you.
going to go with Galen Brandt. Okay, so I'm going to ask Galen to unmute yourself, and everybody else, please mute yourselves. And Galen, tell us a story.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
And Galen, you
Yes.
are co-host, so you can do the.
Well, and actually, Steve has agreed to accept responsibility.
Yeah, we've got it covered. Thanks, Pat. Or God, I keep calling you Pat. Thanks, Cris.
So, yes, I have always been, and still am in many ways, a very impressionable child. The kind of child who especially imprints on the beauty of the natural world. And I was born and raised in Connecticut in a white house that was surrounded by lawns and fields and woods and a big, beautiful meadow. And my very favorite thing to do when I was about 6 or 7 years old on a sunny summer afternoon was walk down through the waving grasses of that meadow to a little house, a little white house right in the middle of that meadow, to visit my next door neighbor and beloved friend, Miss Olmsted. Now, Miss Olmsted lived alone in that little house, and she was by far the oldest person I had ever met. I mean, she was just incredibly old, and I am sure quite a bit younger than I am now. And I would knock on her door, and she would answer it looking as delighted to see me as I was to see her. And I knew exactly what she would be wearing because she always wore the same thing. It was a white blouse and a long black skirt, a big white apron, thick black stockings, and really sturdy black shoes. And you see, I knew that my friend, Miss Olmsted, was a pilgrim because we were studying the pilgrims in first grade, and we had this big thick book with pictures, and to me, well, she just walked right out of that book, which of course made her even more special. So she'd invite me in, and we would have tea and cookies together in her little front parlor. That's what she called it, the parlor. Oh, that little room was so wonderful. And the tea and cookies were so wonderful. And everything we talked about was wonderful because she was so wonderful. And then maybe most wonderful of all to me was that after we'd had tea, she would take me outside and we would stand together on her little wooden front porch, just looking out at the waving grasses of that meadow on that golden afternoon. And then on one of those afternoons, well, she showed me something, and then she taught me something, which to me was so amazing and so full of magic. There was this moment when an electric thrill just flashed through my entire little body. And I was completely filled up with this wild, reverent joy, which I can still feel. It's a true cellular memory. So much so that when a few years ago I first heard Jackson Gilman use his beautiful phrase, close encounters of the natural kind, I just went right back to that moment. Every cell in my body could feel it again. And since then, Jackson and I have been collaborating entirely on Zoom, which is why we thought this would be great for a Zoom swap. And now when I sing, what I didn't tell you, when I have moments like that, imprinting moments, what I usually do is write a song about it. So now he and I have collaborated, and when I sing, he physically interprets it with his movement artistry. And when I watch him, that movement, that moment just comes to life for me all over again. I can feel it. And I would just love it if you could feel that moment too. So now I'm going to invite my dear friend Jackson to join me. And he's going to show you exactly what it felt like to 6-year-old me when I had that precious, close encounter of the natural kind. I may disappear now, Steve, if you would. When I was 6 and 7, on a sunny summer's day, I'd wander through the meadow to a house just down the way. And old Miss Olmsted would invite me in for tea. And then we'd step outside on her little porch, for she had a gift for me. She had a special treasure that she wanted me to find. A close encounter of the natural kind. She'd put a seed right in my palm, and I'd hold out my hand, and I'd stand so still I'd hardly breathe. And I'd wait for what might land. A flash of wings, a chickadee would snatch that little seed, and in taking, give me everything that a child could ever need. The most important treasure that a child could ever find. A close encounter of the natural kind. The pecking of a little beak, my chance to understand. A tiny little miracle had happened in my hand. As we grow big, do we lose sight of all those little things? Like the twinkling of the stars at night, or the flash of whirring wings. The pecking of a little beak, so sharp against our skin. If we fall out of touch with these, oh, can we fall back in and taste the joys of everything that nature has designed? These close encounters of the natural kind. May we forever be as children. May we be never blind to these close encounters, these precious close encounters of the natural kind.
Oh, wonderful. Wow, what a neat way to show us that and to help us feel that. I think that wild, reverent joy of yours sure shines through in your telling and the beautiful work that Jackson did. So, questions, comments? Do you have any specific thing that you want to hear from us, by the way, Judith or Galen?
I can think of one thing, but I think we'd much rather just hear what you have to say.
Okay, Judith then has a comment.
That was a wonderful story, Galen, and took me back to my childhood when I visited a neighbor. But even more, Jackson, I think I just read this morning or that you did movement stuff, and I thought, and the way it was worded, I thought, that, what could that be? And now I've seen it, and it's just what your interpretation of Galen's song was so beautiful and so wonderful. I am just touched and admiring. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for the story, Galen.
Well, thank you so much. And I know what you mean about Jackson's movement stuff, because I saw it exactly once years ago and pounced on him. We got work to do.
Wonderful visualization. Anna.
Oh, it was so precious. And you're both just so expressive. It comes across really beautifully on Zoom, actually. I mean, Galen, your facial expressions, I'm just right with you in every moment. And Jackson, you're adorable. Like every single thing you're doing with your face is so cute. My God. And halfway through in the last verse, when you start to talk about may we all have that kind of wonder about the world. My 7-year-old son ran in and he wanted to show you all a rock that he'd found. He was like holding it up to the screen. Look at this sparkly rock. And it was like he was totally getting it. He can't hear it because I'm on, on the, he can't hear the sound, but he just spontaneously
I get it.
was getting it. The transmission came through. I want to show you his precious
Thank you.
natural treasure.
Thank you so much. Please thank him.
Yeah. Hey, I'm a geologist, so if he has any more questions, email me. Looks like a granite to me. Galen's got quartz crystals, so.
Oh my goodness, you are good.
Oh no, I'm sorry, that's hematite. Yeah, Harvey.
Yeah, I knew that Zoom has the potential of doing a split screen, which is what you started doing. And that's what I assumed was going to happen. But when Galen said, no, just show Jackson, what a difference that made. So that he had the full screen as he was showing the song you were singing. And it was beautiful, like everyone else said. But it's good to know that both techniques are available. And I think you chose the right way to show it. Very well done, both of you.
Thank you. That was actually the one question that we had, because we tried it both ways, split screen and just with Jackson. And then we showed it to a critique group we belong to and a few other folks and decided, yes, just Jackson is right.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks very much for picking up on that.
Yeah, I thought when we first did it, that's what it was going to be, but then because I wasn't sure how it was going to progress. But yeah, that was great. It's like, when you're full screen, all of a sudden it really pops.
And interestingly, just as a Zoom technique, somebody told us that who had seen both versions, that she could actually hear the song better when she watched just Jackson, which is kind of counterintuitive when you're thinking Zoom and you're a songwriter, but that was wonderful because that's what you want, right? Is for whatever you're doing to be heard and received as well as possible on the other end.
Yeah, and for some reason, because we weren't watching you, it was like it integrated much better. Sue.
Yeah, for me, with you not on screen, Galen, it was almost like you're the orchestra in the orchestra pit. You know, it becomes just that give and take between the music and the movement was lovely. And also because your voice and your story is, you're a woman, and having a man do it, having you disappear during that physically, it made a greater possibility for wonder of it for me personally.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I think it was Bruce Marcus said to me when I was so you're telling me that Jackson is going to be a 6-year-old girl? Yes, exactly. Doesn't that sound like Bruce? But I think it actually does open it up because we're just talking about any child. As Anna, is it Anna? Sorry, your son made so beautifully clear. I just love that he responded that way.
Oh, and by the way, Galen, you have a beautiful voice. I'd never heard it. I've never heard you before, so
Thank you.
thank you for gracing us with that. That was really wonderful.
Thank you for gracing us with the opportunity, all of us, to be virtually together in a swap. Thank you.
Well, you know, as Cris pointed out, you got 3 opportunities every month to do this. So, if there are further comments, and there are some comments in the chat, Galen and Jackson, so you can look at those if anybody has additional comments for this great team. Go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will move on to Pat Coffie. So let me get you spotlighted, Pat. Tell us a story.
331 years ago, my blood relatives were in Andover, Massachusetts, and in the history books, they are credited with bringing the witch trials to Andover, where more people were accused and punished than in Salem. Elizabeth was poorly at that time. Joseph and Elizabeth might have been model Puritans. He took care of his wife and 11 children and operated a fulling mill with his brother. Now, a fulling mill is a place where they wash woolen fabric to tighten the weave. It was important in Andover. Witch naming came when these two became the victims of the fear and the superstition and the accusations that were part and parcel of Puritanism. Research has shown that Joseph and Elizabeth might have been model Puritans. He farmed, built, and operated that mill and paid his share to support the preacher, put up his share of the preacher's firewood, and took care of his family. Elizabeth ran the household and gave birth to 11 children over 20 years. Housewife and mother were her primary jobs. In that time of limited medical knowledge and the limited availability of doctors, she gave birth to 9 strong and healthy children. The baby girl born 10th lived only 9 days. The baby girl, born 11th, lived only to be 2 years old. They followed one of the Puritan traditions. Both little girls were named Tabitha. Between March of 1687 and July of 1692, scarcely 5 years, Elizabeth continued to run the household and meet the needs of her husband while dealing with the loss of 2 children and 2 souls for the Puritan Church, and developing a lingering illness that finally sent her to bed. Elizabeth was poorly in 1692. Life was really strict for the Puritans. They were told constantly they were born in sin, you know, that Adam and Eve thing. And they had to be ever vigilant lest the devil overtake them. And although they were predestined for damnation or salvation, they could not know that while they were alive. They would only learn that when they were dead. And so they looked for signs of success because they thought that meant you must surely be destined for salvation. They were expected to watch and report on one another and stamp out any sign of evil. Fear was everywhere. Punishments were harsh, as there was no thought of redemption, only a demonstration of how we dealt with evil. Whippings were administered with a certain number of lashes per offense. Stocks could fasten a man or a woman by the ankles, wrists, and neck in place on the public square so all could see, berate, and throw things at these transgressors. Sometimes the ears of the person were nailed to the stocks and then sliced off. This is on the public square where families could watch. One man saw through the accusation and dispossession ruse and refused to cooperate in any way. When he learned he had been accused, he took the steps to sign over his possessions to someone else, because whoever said you were a witch could take your possessions. In one instance, they even took the pot of stew on the stove. This man, for the good of his soul and of the community, was pressed, laid in a shallow pit, and then boulders were piled on him until he was crushed and died. But he was able to have transferred his assets to his family. Greed entered and grew. Much more of the awful was employed by these Puritans and their righteous fervor. When 2 girls in Salem, Massachusetts began to claim being witched and naming witches, they became the celebrities of their time. Some feared evil, which could be punished by attacking the person with righteous greed. Well, they saw these 2 girls as the answer to the fact that Elizabeth was poorly. Joseph Ballard brought these 2 girls to Andover, where they said, indeed, at the foot of her bed, they saw witches. And she had been witched, and then they began to name the people who had witched her. And because they didn't know the people in Andover, they could not be told, name that one. I want his farm. And so they named everyone. And when they had named 40 witches, the brother of Joseph Ballard, who was one of the officials, refused to participate any further. The naming went on. They said Elizabeth had surely been witched. The two accusers were led to other sick beds, and they said the same things. Why were so many named in Andover? Because the girls were the celebrities of their time, and they could, and they were encouraged. Elizabeth was poorly, and about 5 days after the visit to her sick bed, she died. Now, we would think about women's health and possibly depression and many other things that medicine has taught us about losing 2 children in 5 years and becoming unable to be the wife and homemaker that the Puritans valued so much. John Ballard remarried within 3 months because family was important. It took years and years to clear the names of the innocent. There was no resurrection for the men, women, and children who were hanged, pressed, or died in the horrific jails of the time. I am the 10th generation of Joseph and Elizabeth Ballard. And as I begin to hear again the rhetoric I saw in researching the story of the Puritans, the absolute control by a church of the government and all the laws and all the families, as I hear that mentioned again, I am afraid. So I need to work on the delivery. It's been written down, but I want to pay attention to the timing of when you say certain things. And, families, I have some pictures. Families came to watch the hangings and to participate in the treatment of the people in the stocks. The Puritans did not come to purify the church. They came to get rid of all the hierarchy, and they ended up developing their own.
Yes, a horrifying story and an important one, and I think you told us. I've heard you tell it once before, and it's clear you've been working on it a lot because it certainly has. It's really riveting. I'm gonna go with Harvey and then Gail.
In your incredible way you tell stories, that was the most emotionally 8 minutes I have ever spent listening to something. And I was riveted to it. And I knew you were going to come up with something. I knew you would tag it at the end and bring it up to date. You had to, because you always do. But how perfectly done. I wouldn't change anything in the way you, and as in the way you say it. I mean, it was very well done. Thanks for sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Gail.
I would love, Pat, for you to publish this as an editorial in the newspaper. I know that the Daily Hampshire Gazette from Northampton would love to publish what you just wrote. You said it's written, so that's why I'm saying that. They've been having a series of cautionary editorials and articles on different pages. And if you need help doing that, boy, I think it should go far and wide what you wrote.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll think about that.
Okay.
Okay, Cris.
Once again, I'll echo Harvey, Pat. Incredible. Incredible. Your voice doesn't change story to story, and everybody, sometimes they're a little bit lighthearted, but not that one. And as far as the details of what happened to folks, whether you include that or not in your performance, I think depends on the audience, depends on the age of the audience.
Okay.
Because you could tell that to younger kids, but I don't know, I shy away from that kind of true violence
Okay.
from little teeny ones.
Okay.
But thank you, thank you, thank you. And I agree with Gail, that would be fabulous to be published.
Yeah, Chris mentioned the voice, and I think your sort of matter of fact delivery just really adds to the weight of the story. And
Okay.
yeah, incredibly so. Any other comments? Well, I know it's probably take people a while to process that one. And if you have any comments now or even or later, I'm sure, Pat, if you want to share your email, then you know, if people have comments afterwards, after you've processed it a little bit, then you'd be able to do it if you want to do that, Pat. And so with that, I have to. We're going to move on to the next one, and I have to apologize, Judith, but I've got to introduce you and then trot off because I got to get ready for the next session that I'm going to be tech for, and I commend this to you. The next one up is is going to be a beautiful workshop about mime and movement and all sorts of really interesting things. So unfortunately, they scheduled it during the dinner hour, but it's going to be a great workshop. So hopefully we'll see you there in a little bit. And
Who
with
is
that,
doing it? Who
I'm
is
sorry.
doing that mime and movement? Who is doing it?
Hang on. It is Kuniko Yamamoto, and she's doing some really interesting things in it, and she's done some really interesting things.
I'm not sure the virtual people have that on their schedule.
Yes, it is part of the virtual
It is?
schedule.
Yeah, it is. All the Assist made two virtual workshops. Kuniko's workshop this afternoon is called Curriculum Connections, Storytelling, Origami, and Math.
And this is the one Steve is talking about?
Yeah,
Yep.
that's the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Okay. So with that, I'll introduce Judith in Seattle. And Judith, tell us a story.
Thank you. Well, I told this story once. I found it and thought, oh, this might make a nice story in a program of stories about men and women and their relationships. And so I'm still working on it and would welcome any kind of feedback. And it's not very practiced because I wasn't expecting to tell today, but I love this guild, and so I wanted to offer this. And it takes place in the same part of the world that Pat's story took place in. So in 1770, a man named Samuel Pierce built himself a big house on a farm in northwestern Connecticut. And then he looked around and found that there was a lovely daughter of a nearby farmer, Lucy. And he found that she was lovely and decided that he would ask the father if he might court Lucy. Well, the father felt that Samuel was not the right man for his Lucy, and he denied permission to come courting. Now, Lucy was an unusual girl for those days. She did not like to do household chores. She was hopeless with needle and thread. She didn't like wearing frilly dresses. She, in fact, and she never said things like, yes, I'll do as you say. Of course, that's how we'll do things. No. And when she could ride a horse, build fences. When she wrestled with her brothers, she left them lying in the mud. She was really something different for that age, of course. So when she heard that her father had denied permission for Samuel to come courting, she was irked. For heaven's sake, she had met him. She found him quite handsome and thought he would make a good husband and a fine father. So she went to her father and said, Father, I would like to have Samuel court me. Lucy, I have made my decision. I said no, and it stands by that. Are you sure? Yes, you may not have him courting, not as long as you're living under my roof. Thank you, Father, for making that perfectly clear. Then you abide by my decision. No, I will be moving out from under your roof. And in fact, she saddled her horse and rode directly to Samuel's farm. They talked over the matter and decided to elope that very afternoon. They went across the state line into New York, found a justice of the peace who could do the honors, and headed back home again. On the way, they dreamed of their life together. Samuel said, my dear, I'll be setting out the rules for our household. Excuse me? You will be setting out the rules? Well, I'm the man after all. Well, yes, but I can run the farm just as well as you can. And I don't see any reason that I shouldn't set the rules. Lucy, And Samuel thought about that for a while, and then he said, you know, another way of doing it would be to have a contest. When we get home, a contest of strength. And if I win, I will set the rules. And if you win, you can have the honors. Lucy smiled and agreed. So when they got back to the farm, Samuel went in the barn and found a long rope. He took one end and threw it over the roof of the barn. And he said, I'll stay on this side and pull on the rope. At my signal, we'll both pull on the ends of the rope. And whoever can get the rope over the barn roof to their side will be able to be in charge of our household. Very well. And Lucy went around the barn and got her end of the rope. Samuel gave the signal and they began to pull. Lucy pulled. Samuel pulled. Lucy pulled. Samuel pulled. Neither of them could get the rope over the barn roof. Samuel called to Lucy, Lucy, would you come over on my side? I'd like to show you something. Now, I would have been suspicious, but Lucy went around to see what he was going to suggest. And he said, here, you take hold too, and you pull with me. And Lucy did. And they both pulled, and rope came whisking over the barn roof and landed in a big pile at their feet. And Samuel said, Lucy, I think that is the way we should run our household. We should pull together. And Lucy agreed. And I see that you're agreeing too. Indeed. And they lived a long and happy life on a prosperous farm, raising their many children. Thank you. It's called Pulling the Rope, and it's from a Pleasant to Spain book called Sweet Land of Story. Thank you.
Marvelous, marvelous, marvelous. I was waiting for her to do that.
And I suppose there's no reason not to change that. And then she wouldn't have to be suspicious, because I really wouldn't have done it, I think. Maybe I would have said, you come over here. So thanks, Cris. That's a good change. That was probably a good change.
I'm thinking that there are versions of that from various different places. So it'd be interesting to see what the other, were you looking for comments in particular, Judith? Were you looking for comments in anything in particular?
No, I think anything that you want to say. Thank you.
Okay, Harvey, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it reminded me of the story, The Stone by the Door, which I told at my child's wedding. I was waiting for her to tie it either to an animal or a post. And
Yeah.
win
That way. Yeah.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of having her make the suggestion.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
anyway, well done. Yeah, it was a very good story.
Harvey, what was the name of the story that you told at the wedding? That sounds like a great idea.
I think it's called The Stone by the Door.
Oh, Stone by the Door. Okay.
Actually, if you look up on YouTube and search me out, that may be one of the videos I have of me telling it.
Okay, super.
So,
Thank you. You know, I thought about, if I have another minute, that there's one story from, I think, Norway, where the husband said, my wife, you know, accepts everything I do. And he manages to not sell the cow, but trade down. And she's fine with all of that. And as a result, he wins a bet that she'll be angry, because she's not. And then there's another one where the wife always wants the opposite of what the husband wants. So he says, I guess we're not going to have a big family celebration at Christmas this year. I mean, it would cost a lot of money. Well, of course we will. And well, we can't have turkey and ham and roast. Of course we can. And so he gets his way from the contrary wife. So I thought, yeah, that those mixing some of those together might make a program for, I don't know, Valentine's Day or Grandparents' Day or something.
There's a Swedish story about the no, I can't remember the name of it, but he complains that she doesn't do enough work. That he's the one that works hard.
Right.
He
right.
says, okay, fine, I'll trade places with you.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you'll know I'm looking for those kinds of stories. Yes, Jim.
Anna, and then Jim.
What a charming story, Judith. And I just loved your pacing of it and the way you presented to us and the characters and everything. It was just wonderful. I enjoyed it so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Anna.
Okay, I just think you're such a wonderful teller, Judith, and it was great to hear the story. And I was thinking about the trading down with the cow story, which just made me think of there's a whole series of stories like that from Iran about a little boy that keeps messing everything up. I mean, it's similar to the Jack tales, which you all probably know, but it's not a couple's tale. But at risk of being totally annoying, the one thing that kind of stuck out to me as something you might think about changing was just using the phrase, do the honors. Like it came up twice and it was sort of like, oh, that's a little cliche. I don't know. It just sort of
Oh,
like
okay.
everything else is so great that I just thought, maybe
Thank you.
a different phrase. That's just-
Okay, thank you. And I didn't realize I'd said it twice, so thank you.
yeah.
Good.
And I did notice, Judith, that you were doing character placement with turning.
Oh,
the
yeah.
head.
I,
You don't need to do it to such a degree.
okay,
Because with the screen, we're so close that just a little turn will
okay.
do it, because we really want to see your whole face.
Thank
So
you.
if you turn this far, then we only see part of your face.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we get the idea because you've done enough vocally between the characters,
Uh-huh.
since there's really only two.
Yeah.
Or three, that you've done enough vocally between the characters that we really know who's speaking.
Thank you.
But marvelous story.
Thanks. Thank you for letting me tell.
Oh, marvelous. Thank you. All righty. Oh my goodness, we've got time for one more. And Anna, you said you were interested in telling a story.
Oh, really? I thought there was somebody else signed up, but it wasn't, we haven't done 5, have we?
No, you'd be the 5th.
Oh,
Angela, you had signed up. Are you ready to tell a story?
oh. Really? Okay. If Angela's not around,
No,
unless she
well,
is.
she's here, but I don't see her face, and I'm not hearing anything.
This
Hang
is
on.
Angela.
Oh.
This is Angela. I'm just listening. Thank you.
Okay,
Oh.
all right, thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna move into a different space, so I don't get interrupted by a child. It's not a long story, but I also preface it by saying it's not my story. So I just wanted to make that clear. It's from a story podcast that I listened to. So I hope that's not just a total no-no. I think what would be great about this story is to get a very low light.
Judith, I put in the chat screen
Story is
a link to me telling the story, The Stone by the Door.
there we go. That's kind of what we want here.
Hey, tell us a story, Anna.
Great. Okay. All right. Are you able to see even with it being this dark? How's that?
Oh,
Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
yeah, we can see you. It's a bit spooky.
That's what that's intended. It's intended to be that way. All right. So when I was just out of college and I just finished my teaching certificate, I got my very first position, and I was teaching 7th grade. And it was a very big high school in Los Gatos, California. And I was assigned to this room. And I also had night classes. So I would finish my teaching and then I would go to my night class, but it was so much later that I often stayed in my classroom after school was done. And I'd be the only one in my room. And as the fall went on, each afternoon I started to feel something in that room, something like a sensation of dread. And I did not know what it was, but strange things started happening in that classroom. For instance, one morning when I came in early, I saw this pile of chalk in the middle of the classroom. Like someone had, this is when we used to have blackboards. They took all the chalk and put it in the middle of the room and stamped on it. And I thought, oh, it's probably just my students playing a prank on me. And then another morning, like all the erasers would be piled up in the middle of the room. Oh, this is weird. But I bet it's just the 7th graders. Maybe some kid came in here after school and did this. And one morning I came in and there was just this little word in the very bottom corner of the blackboard. It was just the word help. And it was written in this very old-fashioned looking script, not something my students typically use. And then one evening, my husband came to pick me up. We were just newly married and he got some takeout and he was down, parked in front of the school, and I came down and I opened the passenger door and he startled. And he said, "Oh, I was just looking at you. You were up there in the window of the classroom. I saw you. You were staring down at me. And I was wondering why you weren't coming down." And I said, "No, I wasn't. I'm right here." And together we both looked up to the classroom window, but there was nobody there. And then there was the time that one of my students said they'd seen me standing in the classroom window too. And they used to call me by my last name. He was like, "Dang, Sobel, why are you teaching so late the other night?" And I said, "Teaching late?" He said, "Yeah, I mean, you were in the classroom. I was walking my dog after dinner, and I looked up and I saw you in the classroom window, but you didn't wave at me or anything. Why are you just staring?" And I said, I wasn't staring. I was working kind of late, but then I went to my class and I just thought that was really strange. And then there was this one night, I remember it was actually October 13th. And I was sitting in the classroom correcting papers before my night class. And I started to get this feeling of dread, like there was someone else in the classroom with me. I felt that there was a shadow. Just, I would, every time I would glance to a certain corner of the room, I felt like I just missed something there. And I started to hear these whispers, and the whispers were getting louder. And then I smelled, I thought it was a campfire. Even though I was indoors, I smelled smoke. And then as the whispers are getting louder, I very distinctly heard the words, "Get out." That was it for me. I dropped whatever I was doing. I left my purse in the classroom. I just ran out of there. And after that, I tried not to stay too late in the classroom. I tried to just get my work done. If I had time before my night class, I would just go home or I would go to a coffee shop. And things were okay. Nothing too strange happened for a while until the spring dance. It was a Sadie Hawkins dance. I remember this is where the girls asked the boys. And of course, all the staff have to chaperone. So I was there chaperoning the dance. And then as soon as the dance was over, the staff just fled. They just go home. And I had left my purse up in my classroom. So I look around and I'm trying to find if there's somebody who's able to go with me, and everyone has just gone home. So I go up to my classroom and I walked into the hallway, and all I could see was the red exit sign at the end of the hallway. And there's no one in the hallway. And I walked to my classroom door and I opened the door, and there's someone in my room. She's standing by the blackboard, but facing the blackboard with just inches between her face and the blackboard. And she's not looking at me. Her hair is kind of in this updo. You can't see me, it's too dark. But her hair was in this old-fashioned updo, and she was wearing a very high-collared dress. It was a charcoal color, went almost to the floor, but then I couldn't see what her shoes were because it was almost like it was blurred out at the bottom. And I knew I was seeing what I was seeing, but I didn't want to admit it to myself. So I just thought, maybe this is someone who's not supposed to be in my classroom. So I just went, "Excuse me, you're not supposed to be here. Could you please leave?" And with that, this woman turned her head. She was looking at the blackboard, and she sort of turned it to the side to look at me. And I saw that the whole side of her face was charred, like it had been burnt. And I just ran out of there. And I went into the hallway and I was going, "Help! Is there anyone here? Can anyone help me?" And I went downstairs and the janitor was just locking up the theater. And I said, "Can you please come with me? I think there's someone in my room." And he came with me and we went into my room and there was no one there. And I just grabbed my purse and my keys. And the whole weekend, I just was not myself. I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was this awful charred face that I had seen and the way this woman looked at me. And it was almost like she had this recognition. She looked at me right in the eyes. It was so chilling. And that Monday when I went back to school, I talked to a teacher who had been there a very long time. In fact, she'd been there so long, she had trained some of the teachers I was currently teaching with. And I said, "Was there ever a fire at the school?" And she said, "Didn't you know that there was a wildfire that ran rampant through the school, actually through the whole town, about 100 years ago?"
It wiped out Los Gatos completely. You can look it up. And so I did. I started looking through these pictures of the town and the fire. And the school was a much smaller school, but there was a school. And I saw a picture of a woman in a classroom. And you know, she looked a lot like me. She had light eyes, dark hair. She kind of had my stature. And I thought, that's the woman I've been seeing. And I really couldn't talk about it with the school or with my students for a long time, but I thought, maybe I saw her because I was working so late. That first year of teaching, I was easily working 16-hour days. And maybe that's why this happened to this woman. Maybe she was stuck in the fire because she was working late too. And maybe if she just stuck to the hours that she was contracted to be in the school, maybe this wouldn't have happened to her. Maybe it was a warning to me. And so I thought about that. I really did start to cut back on my hours. And as time grew, as time went on, I tried to achieve a better work-life balance. And time went on, and I had a family, I had my kids. And then about 12 years after I saw that woman in the classroom, I felt comfortable telling the story. And I would tell my students that I had seen this woman in the classroom. And then sometimes I would think about, how should I retell this story? So I went down to Haight-Ashbury and I thought, let me try to get a dress that looks like this woman. And I went into one of those thrift shops and I said, I'm looking for this dress. It's floor length. Well, they brought out, this woman who worked in the store brought out not a dress like it, but I kid you not, the exact dress that I had seen on this woman. It really smelled like an old dress. It was a floor length, high neck, charcoal dress. And it actually fit me. And so one day, just to freak my students out, I looked up some tutorials, I did my hair up, I wore that long dress. And so when they came in, I was standing like this, close to the blackboard. And I turned my head to look at them. The end. Here's my interruption here.
Marvelous. Did anybody expect that that's where that was going to go?
What a story. Wow.
Anna, were you looking for any feedback in particular?
You said you heard it somewhere else? Where? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, my kids are talking. Guys, can you just give me a moment? I don't know. That story is from Spooked, which you should all start checking out. This is a podcast about real ghost stories that people have experienced. So I was not an actual full-time teacher. That's not my story. It's an episode of Spooked. So and I'm gonna have to look up the name of that teller because they don't give first and last names, but her name was Kristen, I think. So that's sort of all the credit that I'm able to give. I don't know, maybe there's a better way to credit it that you all know about, but this is for, I'm telling a bunch of ghost stories at a college in 2 weeks for their like camping theme or something. They're just gonna have me tell ghost stories in the cafeteria. So, but I welcome your comments and feedback, and it's gonna be lit kind of like that, but it won't be on Zoom, it'll be live. So I hope you're able to see what was going on, even though it was so dark.
Harvey, go ahead.
Well, I just had a question in terms of credits or logistics in telling a story that someone else's or that someone else heard or told. You might want to, I mean, if you can get permission from Kristen or whoever it was to tell it. I mean, I don't know if you did already.
Yeah, I wrote to Galen Washington, who's the moderator for Spooked. I told him that I had this gig coming up, and I listed all the stories. It's like 6 episodes that I'm going to retell. So that's the best I could kind of do, but I didn't hear back from him.
Right, but you might want to start off when you perform it to let people know that, you know, because you're telling it in first person. And I'm not sure how other storytellers here feel about that, but just an introduction. These are stories I've heard, and I will be telling it to you in first person. But I don't know if that takes away from the story, but from a legal standpoint, I'm not sure where it stands.
Sheila,
It was
you
a great telling.
yeah, it was. It was.
You had me.
Thank you.
I had to turn the brightness on my screen all the way up to see you. But yeah, it was an excellent telling.
Thank you.
Angela, did you have a comment?
Yes, that was really enjoyable. And I wanted to ask you if in your practice, you've ever told the story in third person. So if you were to, since it is someone else's story, have you, even just as an exercise, ever told the story that there was a teacher, and then go from there, so that we get to hear you as the narrator?
Yeah.
And if you want to go in as first person briefly, you could. But I have found that's another way. I had to keep reminding myself that this is not your story.
Yeah.
And it's lovely to hear it in first person, but I think it would still work and have the same weight if you told it in third person.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah,
but
three of the
beautifully
stories.
done.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm telling 6 stories, and 3 of them were narrated originally by females. So I felt like it could work, and they were close to who I am. But 3 of them are told by men. So I do tell those in third person. So I could go with telling them all in third person if you feel like that's more.
Well, I'm just
ethical.
saying you could give it a practice. You could just try it. And one last thing is, I noticed that you actually changed tense, moved into present tense at some point in the last few minutes of the story. And in the work I've done with Laura Sims, even if we're telling in first person of something that happened before, when we accidentally flip into present tense, that what I've learned, it's my experience, that is a cue for me that there's something in that moment of the story that I haven't solved for myself as the teller. So I've always seen that as a clue that there's a little more work to be done inside that moment. I'm sorry, I can't tell you which one it was, but beautiful.
Thank you so much. Can you say again, what is that a cue to? And I that was a mistake. I needed to be more consistent about the tense, obviously, but what is it a cue for?
Sometimes when we come to a moment in the story, and it usually happens in the transition of a story, we actually, the narrator flips into present tense. So we start saying, and he is doing this rather than he was doing this, or so.
No, that's clear. That's clear. But what you're saying, it means that it just needs more work, or that
there's a little something there that needs some more attention from you as the storyteller working with that work. There's something unexamined.
Interesting.
It's a possibility. Thanks.
Gail.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this story, Anna. And even in the dark, when I could hardly see you, it was very, very spooky. So it's going to work. And I think all that is needed would be, she thought to herself, or she realized, in other words, it would still have that feeling for me, I think, rather than the I moved, I did, it really would. And then that way you're kind of acknowledging it's someone else's story. So I agree.
I agree with Gail, Anna, that I don't think if you shift to third person, I don't think it's going to lose any of the spook.
Yeah, no, not at all.
And
that's what I'm saying.
Your timing, and I'm really glad that it wasn't a jump tail. Because I don't care for those, and they make me really nervous. I was waiting for something to jump out from behind the blackboard, but I'm kind of glad it didn't. Folks, we are out of time. Thank you so much for coming. I'm glad that new people got to come to the Virtual Storytelling Guild. Please remember that we meet 3 times a month, so that when you're working on something or you want to listen to other people work on something, come on down. Come on down. Gail, you should have gotten an email about the next virtual track session, which is going to start in about 3 minutes.
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent.
Pretty
So,
talented.
thank you all so very much. And
See you all at the next event. Appreciate you.
good night, everybody.